Hi, I'm Raslin.
Hi, I'm Nikita.
Hi, I'm Bhumika.
Hi, I'm Rasleen.
Hi, I'm Megan.
Hi, I'm Nikita.
Hi, I'm Arfa.
Hi, I'm Devika Shishidhar.
So, despite having many speakers, the language is not very well documented, and this is one of the reasons why we chose Sindhi. A lot of the members of the community came over to India during the partition, and as a result, they have been scattered throughout and are not concentrated in one particular place. And because of this, a lot of assimilation and variation in language and culture have started to manifest. And choosing this language and folktale gives us the opportunity to not only look at the language but also trace the migration histories of these people, and also to explore the continuities between Northwestern cultures that are similar to Sindhi. There is also this anxiety about the language being lost, particularly from the older generation. And there is also the other interesting fact that we found out that Sindhi is one of the first Indo-Aryan languages to be in contact with Persian and Arabic.
So I'll be telling you a summary of the story we've chosen. So Sasi Punu is a folk tale and a very tragic love story, which revolves around the deep and passionate love between Sasi, who is a beautiful girl from Bampur, while Punu is a handsome prince from Makran. Their love story is filled with hurdles and heartache. Sasi, born to a washerman, grows up to be symbol of beauty and grace. Her reputation as the most beautiful woman in the land is very widespread. And upon listening to this, one day Punu is very captivated by the mere just by listening to how beautiful Sasi was. So when finally he decides to meet, when Punu and Sasi finally meet, their love is very instantaneous and intense. However, their love faces a severe opposition from both their families because they disapprove their union due to differences in the social status. Despite these obstacles, Sasi and Punu are very determined of their love, and they finally decides to get married after having to try many tricks and things to make the families approve. So after they decide to get married, Sasi and Punu's love story takes a tragic turn when they become lost in the Harsh desert due to some obstacles. So, separated from Punu, Sasi encounters a group of nomads who take her in and take care of her. But there are many versions where they say Sasi was molested by the nomads and all that. So, meanwhile, Punu's search for Sasi leads to a near death experience. So, basically, they roam in the desert looking for each other, but they end up not finding and they both die of not being able to meet each other. In the end, their love story concludes very tragically, and the Sasi Punu shrine is still located in Sindh today.
हाणे मां तव्हांखे हिकु आखाणी ॿुधायां थी ससी ऐं पन्नू जी। हिकु राजा हूंदो हो, उहो बे औलाद हूंदो हो। सिकी सिकी उनखे हिकु धीअ थी।
तमामु सुंदर, वो एॾी ख़ूबसूरत हुई कि ॼण त चंड जे समान सुहिणी, सुठी, नैन नक्श तमामु सुठो हुअसि। राजा खे हिनखे ॾिसी चंड जी यादि आई त हुन नालो रखियईं ससी। ससी मतिलबु चंड।
ऐं ॾाढी ख़ुशियूं थियूं, चौधारी जाम ख़ुशियूं, राजा जे घर ब्राह्मण सभु अचणु लॻा।
पर कंहिं ज्योतिष अची उनजे पीउ खे चयो भई हिन छोकिरीअ खे तव्हां पालींदा त तव्हांखे अॻिते हली सुठो कोन्हे। त राजा चयो अहिड़ी औलाद मूंखे खपे ई न। ऐं हुन छा कयो, पंहिंजे राणी सां गॾिजी छोकिरीअ खे टोकरीअ में विझी ऐं ॾाढा हिकिड़ी तावीज़ ॿधी ऐं ॾाढा
पाणी तैरजंदी हिकु किनारे ते पहुती। उते हिकु धोबी कपिड़ा पियो धोए। धोबी ॾिठई कि एॾी सुहिणी छोकिरी ऐं हेॾो सभु हीरा जवाहरात उन सां गॾु हुया। उहो उन ॿार खे खणी पंहिंजे घर आयो, पंहिंजी घरवारी खे ॾेखारियईं। उन्हनि खे औलाद न हुई। उन्हनि ॾाढो ख़ुशी सां हिन खे प्यार सां पंहिंजो ॿारु करे पालियो।
जीअं जीअं ससी वॾी थी, उहो धीरे धीरे अञा बि वधीक सुंदर ऐं सुहिणी ऐं तमामु ॾाढी ईअं शहर में सभिनी खे ख़बर पइजी वई कि जेका धोबी जी धीउ आहे ॾाढी सुंदर आहे, ॾाढी सुहिणी आहे। ऐं ॻाल्हि राजा खे बि ख़बर पई त राजा धोबी खे सॾु कयो। राजा घुरायो धोबी खे कि तुंहिंजी धीउ केरु आहे। ऐं धोबी झूठ कोन चई, सच ॿुधाए रखी धोबीअ कि जेका ही मुंहिंजी धीउ आहे ही मूंखे काठे जे बक्से में मिली हुई। त राजा ऐं राणी सम्झी विया कि त पंहिंजी ससी आहे। त उन्हनि धोबी खे चयो कि तूं वरी खणी अच, मूंखे मुंहिंजी धीउ घुरे थी, मूंखे वरी मां घुरां थो, मूंखे मुंहिंजी धीउ वापसि खपे। त ससी त मना करे छॾियईं। ससी खे ॻाल्हि ख़बर पई, पर ससी चयो कि न, मां त मुंहिंजा माउ पीउ हाणे धोबी ऐं धोबणी आहिनि, मां कोन रहंदसि राजा जे महल में, कोन रहंदसि। त राजा ईअं कई कि धोबी ऐं धोबण खे घुराए करे जी सूंहं जी चर्चा चारों तरफ़ फैलजण लॻी वई। हिकु दफ़ो ससी राजा सां गॾु ई कंहिं बाग़ में घुमण वई त उन्हनि सौदागरनि वटि हिकु न तस्वीर ॾिठी। उहो तस्वीर ॾिसी करे ई उनखे उन छोकिरे सां प्यारु थी वियो। उहो फ़ोटो हिकु पुन्नू जो, तस्वीर हुई हिकु पुन्नू जी। पुन्नू हिकु राजकुमार हो। उहो मीर होत ख़ान जो पुटु हो ऐं मीर जलान ख़ान जो पोटो हो। उहे बलूचिस्तान जे हिकु मीकरण शहर में रहंदा हुआ, जेको हाणे पाकिस्तान में बि आहे।
त ससी चई मां हुन सां मिलणु थी चाहियां, ऐं उहा वई मिलणु। हू बि आयो, ॿई हिकदमि हिकु नज़र में ॾाढो प्रेम में पइजी विया ऐं ॾाढो सुठा हुननि जा ॾींहं गुज़रण लॻा। सोचियऊं शादी था करियूं, कंहिंखे एतिराज़ु हो कोन, पर पुन्नू जे ॿिन्ही भाउरनि खे एतिराज़ु हो कि अहिड़ी सुहिणी छोकिरी असांजे भाउ खे कीअं मिली। त हुननि हिकु ॾींहुं छा कयो, पंहिंजे भाउ खे ॾाढो शराब पियारे करे ऐं पंहिंजे घर वठी विया हली। छो त पुन्नू जॾहिं आयो ससी सां मिलणु, उन शहर में रहिजी वियो। बंबोर हो शहर जो नालो।
उनखे उठ ते वठी विया त पोइ हीअ जॾहिं उथी बिस्तरे तां ससी त ॾिठईं कि पुन्नू आहे ई कोन। त चईं हीअ हिनजे भाउरनि जी बदमाशी हूंदी। हुनजी माउ पीउ सभु रोकनिसि पई न वञ। चईंसि न, मां न रही सघंदसि हिनजे बिना। त चयूंसि हेॾो परे, चईं न, हिनखे बेसुधी में ई निकिती हीअं पेरे उगाड़ी, न पेरनि में चपल न छा, ईअं ई निकिरी करे हलंदी हली सही रेत हुअसि, जबल सभु पार कंदी वञे, पेरनि में छाला पइजी वियसि, उन बुख सभु हुअसि, पर हलंदी वञे। हुनजो हो कि मां वञी पुन्नू सां मिलां, पुन्नू खे मां रिजाए करे वापसि वठी अचां।
अॻियां हली त हिकु चरवाहो हुनखे नज़र आयो। हुनखां पाणी वठी पीअणु चाहियईं त हुन पाणी ॾिनसि, पर हुनजी सुंदरता ते उहो चरवाहो बि दीवानो थी वियो। ऐं न पुन्नूअ सां ख़राबु कमु करणु पिए चाहियो, पर पुन्नू सम्झी वई ऐं ॾाढो ॾकी वई ऐं न भॻवान खे प्रार्थना कई कि मूंखे हिन चरवाहे खां बचाए, मूंखे तूं पंहिंजे शरण में अपनाए। हिन जी प्रार्थना सचे मन सां कयईं त धरती फाटी वई ऐं हीअ ज़मीन में समाइजी वई, पर हिन जो रोह ॿाहिरि ई रहिजी वियो।
हुन पासे पुन्नू खे बि ॾाढी ससी जी यादि पे आई ऐं पुन्नू बि चए न, मां वञा थो, इहो रेती पार करे मां ससी वटि वेंदसि। त हू बि हुन पासे खां निकितो हो। हू बि जीअं ई आयो, अॻियां आयो, ईंदो वियो, उन जा बि हालति ख़राबु थींदी वई। हिकिड़ो त पाणी रेती में न हुजे, खाधो पीतो कुझु न हुजे, त जीअं ई एक्चुअली ससी जेकी हुई उहा एतिरो थकिजी पई, जान कोन हुअसि ऐं उहा उते मरण जे स्थिति में हुई ऐं पुन्नू बि उते अची पहुतो।
होॾां पुन्नू बि आयो, ॾिठे ससी जो दुपटो ॾिसी उते ई किरी पियो। उन बि भॻवान खे ॾाढी पुकार कई कि मूंखे बि ससी सां मिलाए छॾ। धरती फाटी, पुन्नू बि धरती में समाइजी वियो।
इहा अमर प्रेम कहानी जेकी आहे सिंध जी आहे, ससी पुन्नू, ऐं अञा ताईं उते हिकिड़ी मज़ार ठहियलु आहे अमर प्रेम कहानी हिननि जे बारे में।
So we encountered 2 or 3 dialects of Sindhi during this process. The main recording that we chose to translate and transcribe was in the Shikarpuri dialect of Sindhi. This dialect is spoken in and around this Shikarpur city in Sindh, Pakistan. The other dialects that we encountered were Uttaradi, which is spoken in the northern parts of Sindh, and Vicholi, which is spoken in central Sindh, in and around Karachi. There's a caste element to this, as speakers of the Vicholi dialect belong to upper castes and are often in conflict with speakers of other dialects. This is apparent by how Vicholi was adopted as the standard language and was used for educational and official purposes during the British rule. The literary standard of Sindhi is based on this dialect. There's a caste element to this, like I said. There are differences in the way words are pronounced in both these dialects, or in some cases there are different words altogether. For instance, in the Shikarpuri dialect we have the phrase Sasi hode vaya, meaning Sasi went there, whereas in the Vicholi dialect we would replace the word hode, meaning there, with uthe. Similarly, the pronoun they is pronounced as he in the Shikarpuri dialect, as evidenced from the recording, while in the Vicholi dialect it would be pronounced as he, therefore changing the vowel sound. The word lodaya, meaning to float, is exclusively a word from the Shikarpuri dialect. In the Vicholi dialect we would replace that word with ter and diya. In the recording of the folktale in the Uttaradi dialect, we also noticed that the word reno, meaning to stay, was pronounced as reno without the H sound. This is a particular feature of the Uttaradi dialect. Similarly, in the Uttaradi variant of the dialect, the sentence hi asaji diya kone ka, meaning this isn't our daughter, would be pronounced as hi asaji diya kon ai. So we would replace kone ka with kone ai. And these are some of the variations that we found in the dialect.
So there are many different ways of doing linguistic documentation. And the way in which we chose to do it was, first we identified some speakers of Sindhi, native speakers. Our speakers come from Bangalore, from Bombay, and from Gujarat. This way we felt there would be enough variation because all of these speakers come from diverse linguistic communities besides Sindhi. We got them to record the story, whichever version they were familiar with. Then we transcribed the stories, we translated them, we made a word list of every single word that they use, what part of speech that word is, what its meaning is, and we also made a note of variations. So for example, one variation was the astrologer who makes the prophecy at the time of Sasi's birth. In some stories, the astrologer is referred to as Brahman, whereas in other versions, he is referred to as a Jyotish. His role in both versions is the same. It's only that the word used to refer to him changes. So the reason we chose a folktale was, one thing, folktales have a very close connection with culture and with language because they exhibit a lot of variation. Most folktales tend to be oral or orally passed down, and there doesn't tend to be a definitive written version until very recently. So this means that the same folktale travels across communities, across many different regions, and while the main content of the story remains the same, there is a lot of linguistic variation. We saw the same thing with the many renderings of the folktale that our 5 speakers gave to us. So some of them refer to the priest as a Brahman, and some of them refer to him as a Jyotish. Brahman could mean priest, Jyotish, however, means astrologer. So there's a variation there about the way that the function is being described with respect to the prophecy made about Sasi. Other speakers referred to the basket in which she was put on the river as a sanduk, which means a box, whereas some other speakers used the word tokri, which is a basket. Some people just said she was set afloat on a river, whereas some other people specified that the river was the river Sindh, which has an important geographical connection with the region of Sindh. So there were a lot of these interesting variations, very minor variations. None of them affected the overall content of the folktale, but they added a lot of local flavor and depth to the way that the story was told. This was a very interesting way of looking at these stories because the content of the stories is the same. These variations don't really change what happens. They don't change the plot or they don't change the characters in any way, but they tell us how these minor variations give a lot of local flavor, and how the difference between a box and a basket, or the fact that it was just a generic river or a very specific river. They tell us quite a lot about the communities that adopted this story and told this story.